And to tell us more about this, Professor Song Se-ryun from Kyung Hee University joins us in the studio today. Hello, Professor.
Hello, good to be here.
All right, so just last week, Japanese Foreign Minister Taro Kono visited Korea to meet with President Moon Jae-in to talk about various issues, including North Korea. And like we saw in the report just now, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is now expected to meet with President Trump in Florida. So at this point, we're wondering, what is Japan hoping to achieve by, I guess, putting a great emphasis on the importance of alliance between the U.S., South Korea, and Japan?
Right, from Japan's point of view, so much focus is on what U.S. wants, what North Korea wants, South Korea wants. There is a legitimate concern about the quote-unquote Japan passing. I think he wants to address that, and by way of doing that, I think he will bring up the abductee issues so that that would be a kind of focus point of the discussion.
Okay.
That also represents Japan's line, which has traditionally been tough on the North Korean issues. So I think he will try to secure his presence of Japan in this important issue of Northeast Asia security and also talks between the North Korea and the rest.
So, I mean, ahead of the Inter-Korean Summit, which is slated for next Friday, South Korea and the U.S., the two of them have been stepping up efforts to boost cooperation on dealing with North Korea and other various issues surrounding it. In fact, South Korea's National Security Advisor, Chung Eui-yong, met with his American counterpart, John Bolton, for the first time while he was in the U.S. So how important is this kind of cooperation between South Korea and the U.S. at this point in time?
Yeah, very important in this drama. Plot thickens. It seems like there are not a shortage of a lot of developments. And this time, this drama will be played out in several acts. There will be a summit between the North and South, and then North Korea and the U.S., possibly maybe six-party talks later on in the development. Any kind of story, the key is to hold a storyline straight and not present it as confused. In this case, we have to have a coherent agenda because there are too many players. It's not just the North and South and the U.S., where China is there, right. Russia is butting in, and also Japan as well. So I think the key would be consistently focus on what is important and how those gaps between the different parties in terms of the definition of denuclearization and what kind of steps we take, those thorny and very detailed issues should be worked out in order to see any kind of productive results.
So can we, for now, say that the U.S. and South Korea kind of stand on the same line and one of the most important agendas, which is the denuclearization? Right.
Even when we meet, we as in North Korea and South Korea, we're not meeting as individual sovereignty, but we represent kind of blocks. We kind of represent what the U.S. might want and Japan. Also, North Korea would be representing some of the China concerns and maybe Russia concerns as well. So there would be a lot of issues to be discussed, and denuclearization probably not only the definition of what denuclearization means, but how we achieve there. That traditionally, North Korea has kind of pushed for the multi-step approach, which we kind of criticize as a kind of salami approach, and we did not really give too much credence to that. But this time around, I don't know how they will kind of position themselves in terms of how many steps they want and what kind of preconditions they want. Of course, the U.S. has also its preconditions as well, meaning that U.S. wants the irreversible kind of denuclearization in the Korean Peninsula, which may or may not be acceptable to North Korea, but they will come out with traditional demand if they repeat it, complete withdrawal of U.S. troops in Korean Peninsula. That might be an issue. It might not be an issue if they think that that's the kind of a breaking point.
Now, China and North Korea seem to be kind of taking their relationship to a whole new level now because North Korean leader Kim Jong-un met with Chinese top diplomat Sung Tao when he was in Pyongyang with a Chinese troop, and he met there and they talked about their bilateral cooperation there. And now we heard it earlier in the report in the newscast that President Xi Jinping is likely to visit Pyongyang sometime in June. So where is this China-North Korea relationship heading?
It was a dramatic development, but in hindsight, that made a lot of sense for both parties. For North Korea, if they want to be facing Donald Trump, who was very transactional and also very the deal savvy, they wanted some sort of insurance policy in the event that something does not pan out with the U.S. Even when there is a deal, they want China as an enforcer. You know, there have been many different cases where the U.S. gave some kind of assurance to a regime, but it didn't pan out. We can think of Libya as one, Iraq in the Reagan times, and also the Iran deal. Even Donald Trump threatened to back out. So the U.S. assurance alone is not something that the North Korea want to put too much credence on it. So they want some other superpowers to be in the picture, notably China. Also, China, from China's point of view, again, there's a China passing possibility that was pretty prominent. They wanted to avoid that. And also, China wants to be a prominent figure, not only in this talk, but also in a larger scheme of things, the hegemonic kind of struggle with the U.S. in the Northeast Asia. So they want to be a big figure in this room, and with the recovery of relationship between the North Korea, I think they secured that.
It definitely seems like things are working out that way for China. I mean, China did meet, China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi also visited Japan to meet with his counterpart to talk about all this ongoings. But at this point, I'm kind of wondering, is China beginning to become more of a mediator in all of this? I mean, in the beginning, it was South Korea, us, that was in the driver's seat.
Right. That's a sticking point, I think. In order to keep this consistent storyline, the focus has to be on the South Korea. But as you mentioned, the China's role is becoming bigger and bigger. And China always been a key to this dialogue and the process. So what kind of role they want to play and do play would be another point that will make or break the whole process.
And there's also speculation growing over the possibility of North Korea perhaps requesting for a summit with Russia before the Trump-Kim summit. So what are the chances that we could be seeing that happening?
I think it's pretty good. Russia is not like the olden days, but Russia is still the member of the Security Council in the United Nations and also the member of the six-party talks. So they are de facto in the picture, and the relationship between the North Korea and the Russia could be in the same vein of the North Korea wanting to have more thuggish or the bigger friends in the picture on the side, just like China plays that role and Russia is another.
Okay. Now, what is North Korea then hoping to achieve other than having these big guys on its side by reaching out to its allies?
Well, this time I think the dialogues, I would hope that is very important for North Korea. They've been playing this game for so many years. They've been kind of developing their nuclear capacity for this kind of event, sitting down with the U.S. and the West and get once and for all the concession or some kind of deal for the security and also economic gains. There has already been a kind of a North Korea fatigue, and they cried to wolf for so many times. So probably, if they're thinking clearly, this might be just about the last time, or dashing towards an end point where they could get a meaningful or productive deal out of this.
So let's get back to the issue of denuclearization. I mean, it seems like the U.S., South Korea, and Japan are kind of teaming up and stepping up cooperation for these upcoming summits, while North Korea has been reaching out to China and Russia. But they do differ on ways they view denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula.
Right. This is probably the biggest gap. The denuclearization, when it is uttered by the U.S. and in part Korea, is a complete irreversible denuclearization in the Korean Peninsula. Before we talk about some kind of meaningful package and the lifting of sanctions and all those, because we've been duped so much.
Many times.
Right. But as I mentioned, from the North Korea's point of view too, if they do that first, then those assurances that is given by the U.S. and the rest may not mean much, looking at Libya and other cases.
Okay.
So those 2 points, and also how we get to the kind of agreed point and how many steps do we need, whether we need a 6-party talks first and other series of steps, probably that would be the process-wise very important point. And those gaps, at this point, the gaps have to do with a lot of details. And truly, the devil is in the details if the talks go well.
Right. So we have 10 days to go until the Inter-Korean Summit on April 27th. With that in mind, what kind of role should South Korea play in this whole drama, involving North Korea? And also, what kind of strategies should Seoul have in place in order to really successfully denuclearize the Korean Peninsula?
Right. Because of that, I think that this time around, Korea has to play a big role. This narrative about how the denuclearization could happen and the deal could be made, because we have so many different players and because there's so many different interests clashing in this Korean Peninsula, Korea has to be the one who keeps the international alliance first and also keep the agenda very relevant to the peace in this peninsula. If not, things will happen the way it did before, meaning the failure of so many different talks before. The reason why the 6-party talks have not worked so far is because of those complexities. And managing the complexities this time around would be the key, and that's the role for Korea.
All right. Let's hope that things will be really different this time. Thank you so much for your insight today.
Thank you.